Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I got a special guest. She runs a relatively small YouTube channel dealing with rather YouTube political things such as free speech and what's going on. Just things that generally interest her. And one of our rather long interactions we have on Twitter was concerning welfare, but concerning, like I said, America would never be a European style, um, will never embrace European style welfare or socialism, something like that. Something along this line, like that. But that was like a few months ago. I decided to pick her brain a bit more on welfare. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lady Unicorn or Lady Unicorn EJG on YouTube and well, he had a pretty good explanation. I talk about things that interest me. Usually things I see people talking past each other and getting wrong in ways that annoy me, to be honest. And yeah, sure, we can talk about whatever.
What got you interested in starting YouTube anyway?
Basically, I spent a lot of time around the comments on other YouTubers' channels, and I just kept getting irritated because there were a few channels where I could have decent conversations. There's still channels I can have decent conversations in the comments. But a lot of the time, there'd be stuff that I wouldn't have a problem with the content per se, but I would try to say something like some minor problem with it or whatever, some minor thing that went wrong, and it was a mess. And then I'd noticed that in the places that I could get that civil conversation, people were like, more people need to see this. You need to, they were trying to encourage me to get a broader audience. So it's like, eventually I decided to go ahead and do something that would be more easily shared or seen by other people who aren't part of the initial chat.
That's pretty good. Like trying to break back nuance to these things, to these political YouTube things, YouTube debates. Yes. Has also what political label would you describe yourself as?
Yeah, I don't tend to worry too much about the labels, because mostly they just seem to be used anymore as like insults back and forth. I do tend to be very far left-leaning. I do tend to be rather anti-authoritarian. I'm not somebody who wants to be in everybody's lives, but at the same time, I do tend to, as far as economics, lean more toward the left, probably partially because of how my entire life's been. I've never been in a really good off situation. The best I've been was lower middle class, and it's just gone downhill since I became an adult.
Oh,
so sorry. I've seen a lot of the stuff that goes on with people who aren't in the good side of that.
Oh yeah. So your political views is more so based on your experience and what you see there in your life, right?
To a large degree, yes. I mean, obviously those aren't actually the most important things in determining it, but that's part of what everybody uses in determining most of their ideas until they have something more important as far as information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Like I said earlier, like one of the things I wanted to have discussion about was concerning welfare. You're a very big advocate for the welfare state here in America, but you see there's problems with it, how it's structured here in America, while European states have them structured differently,
Well, I mean, there's problems. There's probably problems with all of them, and I haven't studied in depth a lot of the European versions, but I can definitely see problems that exist here. The problem is they're often not the problems that the critics of it see. Like, people will claim that it's encouraging people to stay on it forever and to not ever work, but the only way I've seen it doing that is the fear of losing it before you even are stable. rather than because you're good enough off you don't want to do better. I've never seen somebody who didn't want a better life who was living on those programs.
Mm-hmm. So you're skeptical of the more conservative solution is to roll back the welfare state or have more stricter requirements to get on welfare?
Yeah, because I've seen how hard it is to get the assistance. I firsthand know people, like I personally know people who spent years with obvious, like anybody could look at them and tell that they had physically debilitating problems and spent years unable to get any kind of assistance at all. While the charities in the areas I've been are just massively underfunded, can't keep up with the gaps that exist, and people feel the need to lie about their situation and make it seem even worse than it is just to be able to get their basic needs met beyond food. So it does make it kind of hard to expect those things to somehow start working if we just get rid of what they're not even managing to fill in the gaps of.
Just, I guess that doesn't get that mentioned off like these things. As you said before, welfare. I mean, not welfare, but charity. Charity doesn't really seem to help that much. Giving the area that you personally live in.
Yeah.
You just think more involvement with the current welfare situation in your place of area will help out more to these people in need of government assistance.
Well, it seems to be the only thing that typically does manage to help. The charities that exist might help somebody get some clothes or pay for a bill once in a blue moon, or about once every 6 months to be more precise. But it has trouble even doing that. People feel the need to lie and say that they've got kids staying at their house when their kids are actually somewhere else or whatever else, just to pull at heartstrings to get the money for that little bit that they can get. Whereas when people get on the assistance programs, life still kind of sucks, to be honest. I mean, most of them barely pay for enough to survive. But it's survival. It's not just maybe I can get my electric turned back on for a month. I think the thing is, some of the areas I've been in, I'm not saying that everybody who opposes these programs is by any stretch like this. In fact, most of the people I've talked to elsewhere are not. They want charity or they want whatever to pick up the slack and take care of people. But a lot of the places I've been, people have this attitude of, it's not my responsibility to take care of you. You're just sucks. You're just out of luck. And so they sit there and they blame the people who are in those conditions and they do nothing to help. And the only way that help comes is if somebody's essentially forced to, either because it's somebody they personally know and they can't bear to live like that, or because there's literally some kind of pressure forcing them to do it. Social, governmental, whatever. And the social's not there when everybody has that attitude, or most people have that attitude.
That seems like the more of the egoism or the individualism of the American mentality. I've spoken to other people, this specific European, about the welfare state here in America, and she was rather surprised that America is like the only country that actually have food stamp programs. She honestly find that to be like rather appalling, given that.
Well, I mean, we have a program here that is the only program that people can even get on if they're not like disabled, over a certain age, or under 18, by the way. Well, barring Medicaid now because of expansions in most states. We have a program that the only thing it'll do is pay for the food itself. You can't even pay for the way to cook it. And you can't buy food that's already cooked. Well, you can, but only if it's been refrigerated after, and thus really needs to be heated again. But it yeah, I deal with that one too. And from what I've heard, a lot of the other places don't do that. They just try to make sure that whatever their assistance is, that you can include your food in it. You can survive and keep that paid too. I've heard that quite a few of the European countries also, basically, it's unheard of to have food pantries. Whereas that's a thing I've run into a lot around here, and that's part of why the only thing that seems to be solved is food.
Just my personal view on welfare is that it's like since I live in America, it's just sort of just warped because of that. It's mostly like it's like from my perspective, I think the welfare state in America pretty much created a dependency class. That's sort of just like my problem with the welfare state, how it was structured and how it incentivized these things, like these this new underclass, this new dependency class. And since I'm like African American, I am African American. I didn't really when I read these studies about the welfare state, it really destroyed the Black family unit. That it basically crippled that. Like, have you ever heard that before? You know,
I've heard people make a lot of claims like that before. I'm not really sure if it holds up, and I'm not really sure why that would justify stripping people of all different ethnicities from their only support system rather than creating something to help encourage fixing that problem.
Well, it's more of a criticism. It's just more of the criticism of the welfare state itself. Like, I don't think they're not proposing anything. Like, the only thing is they just wanted to roll back.
Well, it doesn't. A lot of it doesn't really make sense to me how it's supposed to have done that because, yeah, I'm not Black. I am very much white. So I get that I don't have some of the same perspective, but it's like, every time I've looked at any of these programs, they're a hassle to get on. They're checking in on stuff constantly. If I had the money to do it, like if I were making money off of YouTube at the same time or whatever, I'd probably drop food stamps just so I didn't have to deal with the pain in the ass hassle that it is. The idea that this has people who want that confuses me. Like, why would you want to have to go into an office every 6 months or every month or every year, depending on where you are and what your situation is, and prove to them how much money you're making, how you're getting it, that your bank account doesn't have over a certain amount of money, not be able to save up to basically move anywhere because trying to move into a new place tends to cost over $2,000, even if you're renting. Like, why would people want that? Why do people assume people would want that? Why would people want to go live in a place where not only do you have the normal communication between landlord and tenant as far as restrictions, which are already more than I really want to have, but you also have a lot of them have restrictions like the people around here frequently don't want to have a pet because you have to do things that are frequently considered inhumane, like declaw cats. They can't have claws. Even though that's cutting off their knuckles. Like, can't, or else you can't have a pet or you can't be there. You can't live with people who aren't related to you by blood or legally married to you. Like, it's just so many stupid little restrictions. I just really do not get the idea that the people want to be dependent on this so that they would stay dependent on it if they were given any choice, any information on how to get out. I'm still fighting to try to get people to actually help me with the how do I get out without risking losing my only means of survival before I'm stable.
Just, I don't know. If I was, I don't know, like, you seem like you're putting them in a very uncomfortable position there. Just like, since you're most likely gonna argue it for a more economic and sociological perspective than something on purely based on experience. Like, seem like most of these debates is about what is fundamentally wrong and the social and economic cause of the welfare state and what are the ways to reduce it. Some people are willing to argue that the total abolishment of the welfare state with something replacing it, like such as a single land tax reform or a negative income tax, such as that. Like, those are the solutions I heard to.
I don't generally hear any solutions. I generally just hear people who sneer at somebody in the store because they're using food stamps and they happen to have a soft drink in their cart.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't usually hear any actual debate or discussion on how to solve it. I just hear, this is wrong, they shouldn't have it, whatever. And that does leave a bad taste in my mouth, obviously, being somebody who's kind of living on these programs and wouldn't be alive otherwise.
Yeah. Yes.
I wish I did hear more of the actual, well, this would be a better way to solve the problem. I just generally don't.
Well, I guess you're traveling around internet circles then. Just traveling in wrong circles, because that's the things I usually hear, because since I set myself in a certain political sphere on Twitter and talk to a lot of people who is concerned about the structure of the welfare state.
Well, you can feel free to suggest some people to me for that. Social media is really good at creating inadvertent little bubbles, whether you want to or not, because it just suggests what it thinks you want to see based on other things. And sometimes that can be the dead opposite of what you actually want to see.
Well, there's this one guy. His name is Geo Libertarian George. His Twitter is GeoLibGeorge. You can ask him about single land tax reform to replace the current problems with the welfare state and put an end to rent sinking and put an end to essentially landlordism. But the thing with DeGeorgism is that is a highly retributive system, and apparently it entails no debt rate lost, or doesn't really cause any. What's the best way to explain this? It doesn't have a cost like most taxes does. It doesn't entails any waste.
No overhead, basically. Administrative costs and bureaucracy costs and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can agree that there's a lot of stuff that should be sorted on those kinds of ends. Like, I have no problem saying that there's things that could use to be fixed. Like I said, my problem is mostly that what I tend to hear is not, oh, here are some other ways we should go about this. It's just straight up destructive criticism. This is horrible. They shouldn't have it. This causes this, this, and this. Well, okay, even if that's true, which I'm not sure I believe on some of them, on most of them probably, then what are you suggesting we do? Are you just suggesting we tear away the only way some people are getting by? I'm sure you can see how that would be a problem to see all the time.
Yeah. It seemed like your criticism of the welfare state, how it's structured, is just how annoyingly bureaucratic it is. Just
That's
to get on
a big part of it, yes. Not just to get on it, to stay on it, to be able to do anything with it. I don't have to do it because I technically have a payee, but I know the person. I'm actually related to the person. So I know for a fact that they have to send in regularly a statement on how my money is spent. Can you imagine if that was going on for like working? Oh, you've got a job and you've got income. You need to tell us how much of it's spent on food, how much of it's spent on clothes, how much of it's spent on bills. And to the government, not, or to your employer in that case, not to like somebody who's trying to help you with your finances to fix them. It's just like, what? But those things seem to come about because people think it's being abused. And yes, I'm sure it does at times. But from what I've seen, it's not statistically significant. It's like an occasional occurrence here and there. But people want to get rid of those little cases, so then they push for things to make sure that it's only people who really need it and that it's getting used correctly and doesn't go to drugs, even though there's no evidence that that's a big thing. Yeah, there's a lot of bureaucratic nonsense that gets on my nerves to do with it. And that's the main problem I've personally seen. That doesn't even mean that it's the main problem or only problem that exists with
it. Yeah, just. Oh, right. That reminds me. All right. I guess one of the main problems that people with libertarian conservatives bent is like it didn't eliminate poverty.
Well, how are you going to eliminate relative poverty? Because that's basically the poverty we still deal with for the most part. There is some amount of what would be considered absolute poverty in the US, but that would be people who aren't even getting on the programs. The relative poverty just means that somebody has significantly less than other people, like to the point where when you compare them to others, they are at a way lower status. Absolute poverty would mean they can't afford to eat or they aren't able to keep shelter. And it did essentially eliminate that, at least for the people who were able to get on the programs that sought to eliminate it. It can't eliminate that when the program's only supposed to be slightly supplemental and then doesn't give you enough to eliminate
it. It's just that as I was going with the fact that like one of the main criticism that libertarian conservatives had, like it didn't alleviate poverty. Like they will acknowledge that many of these social programs have really good intentions, but it didn't set out. It didn't achieve their goals. It didn't set out what they achieved to get.
Didn't it? What goals did it specifically set out to achieve but not achieve?
Like eliminating poverty. You know, that was one of the goals. And right now the poverty rate is like really low here in America. I think it's like around 8% now.
But you have to keep in mind what they mean by poverty. There's, like I said, absolute poverty, which is where somebody cannot live properly. They don't have what they need. And then there's relative poverty. You can't eliminate relative poverty without eliminating wealth discrepancies. You would have to have everybody having the same amount in order to not have relative poverty, because as soon as there's discrepancies, some people are going to have a lot and be relatively rich, and some people are not going to have much in comparison and live in relative poverty. It sucks, but it's not something you can set to eliminate in a capitalist system. Whereas the program's actually set to do things like food stamps is set to help ensure that people can afford to get food or afford to get nutritional food, like actually afford to eat. And it's only technically supposed to supplement it, and even the maximum you can get will barely pay for enough to survive. But the maximum you can get for an individual will pay for enough for them to get enough calories and the basic level of nutrition they need. So it essentially does. It's just people are using two different definitions.
Mm. Well, there's like two standards of there's like since we're heading more around to how economists measure poverty, they usually measure poverty by income or by something else entirely. I forgot what was the second method, or by consumption, wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the income tends to be the income rate that we use to look at it to like qualify for the programs, for example, is a relative rate, not the rate. Quiet. Not the rate that it would take to actually not be able to survive.
Mm.
It's the basically like they calculate. Hush. They calculate what they would expect somebody to have to spend, but it's still like higher than what somebody in the lowest situation and willing to sacrifice certain things like really good quality housing or making sure that they're well insulated. It's people sacrifice that kind of thing and still can get by. They're not in their poverty in the sense that we think of with like a third world country. That's part of why people will complain that even the poor here are living so much better off, because somebody who's in poverty here can and probably still does have food to eat, have a place to store it, have the means to cook it, have shelter, have electricity turned on, have water turned on, as opposed to the concept that people will sometimes think of in poverty and the concept that would occur if these programs suddenly didn't exist and something didn't replace them, not if something did as good or better of a job, where people don't necessarily have food, have to go beg or go into places that are preparing it for them to eat, or don't necessarily have shelter and have to hope that they can get into homeless shelters that are overcrowded, or those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Did you ever get away from wanting to go for complete anarcho-capitalism, or are you still into that?
Who said I was an anarcho-capitalist?
Oh, I thought you were for a while. I thought you were going completely anarchist almost.
Who said that?
I guess it was just from the stuff you were posting. Probably very similar to others. I guess it could have just been an assumption.
I got like a video about why it's failed.
Anarchy tends to fail, yeah.
Yeah. No, it goes something much systemic. There's something more systemic about that. You just sort of just okay. That's a different conversation altogether.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me, specifically concerning this topic?
Oh, I mean, you've mentioned a couple things as far as what you think would, or what some people think would be a different answer, a different solution. Do you actually have any ideas you specifically promote or think would be better?
I'm just here to listen what other people have to say. And so far, I like the Freedom Night negative income tax, but it got its own problems. Only thing I see as viable is the Georgia's land value tax, but I want to call myself Age of Georgia's because that in itself is its own document. I don't want to fall into that trap.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really asking for labels. I was just asking if you had any you would promote. But okay.
I will promote the Georgism, but I don't want to be. I don't want to be a the Georges at all.
Okay.
Or the land value tax is to I think about the land value taxes, it's supposed to eliminate a lot of things. Like it's supposedly like it has a lot of redistributed powers. Like it can fix a lot of things concerning public infrastructure, concerning inequality or income inequality, eliminate rent sinking. It's just like those. So there's less those type of things, you know.
I'll have to look into it and see.
Go check out my guy, GeoLib George.
Yeah. I think I already went over and subbed to him when he first mentioned that.
Yeah. Land value tax. I got a video up there. Land value tax explained. He explains it a lot better than I can, because since he's a very strong advocate of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I don't really have any real solution for welfare. It's just like I came to view welfare more just a basic income as something that is going to happen. Like, there's always going to be problems of people's different versions of it, such as I'm just mostly here to just understand it, say what I think about it, and just move on. Or people want to further inquire about my thoughts on it, I usually just talk to people about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And what about you? What would you do to reform the American welfare state?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. I think the main things that I would try to get fixed would be to try to reduce some of this stuff that's going on, to try to make sure that people deserve it or really need it. Because I understand why you wouldn't want somebody who, for example, wins the lottery and has now got millions to spend to still be drawing from the state. But, like, it sometimes seems like it goes too far. Like, I'd probably try to make sure that the gradient and the area of slowly getting out of the stuff was a little bit better, so that there was less concern for people trying to get out, that they would just fall through the cracks and never get back because something fell after. And then I would try to make sure that there was more people, whether it's government agencies helping, specifically funded to help, or other groups that help out. I'd try to make sure that there was more people that could help people navigate the system and navigate their way to a better life. Because I've noticed that in certain areas, even though there's supposed to be programs, they seem to be fairly lacking, and they're only really allowed to help if you want to go through specific channels. Like, I tried to go to Voc Rehab, which is supposed to help people who are disabled but want to work, and the only way they could help me is if I wanted to go get a traditional job. They couldn't even tell me about the limits and requirements if I wanted to monetize my YouTube channel, which doesn't make sense. So I'd try to make sure that there was more aid to help people understand and be able to get a better life regardless of which way they want to do it. And I would try to make sure that the area between absolutely needing it, no questions asked, and absolutely not, that was more of a gradient and more assurance that people, as they got better off, weren't just going to the next day fall back and not be able to even get what they had 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Because those are the main things I personally see. And it may mostly be that they need more people to help people understand it, because it may already be fixed on that other one. I just can't get people to actually help. Yeah. I mean, and of course, there's a lot of bureaucratic overhead that would be nice to get rid of, and but that's a lot. There's a lot of that in a lot of government stuff, and quite a few charities that aren't considered too reputable have that problem too.
Yeah, that's actually rather surprising. Yeah. Have you read any books about the welfare state that you recommend?
No, I can't say that I have.
Oh, it
As
seems.
most, as you kind of observed early on, a lot of mine is based on life, and rather than having read a lot of it. I guess that happens when you're trying to just survive.
Mm, just. There's any? Is there anything else you want to talk about with me?
I have no idea, to be honest. Oh.
Well, earlier before this call, we were just talking about how Twitter just springs out the absolute worst in people.
Oh, it does. Well, it's not just Twitter, and it doesn't always, but yeah, it does frequently. Social media in general has a tendency to. I don't know. I think part of it's the text. Like, it's all text that people are dealing with, so you don't have these vocal cues any more than you have body language. But even where you have room to type, it tends to bring out the worst in people to a degree, because, like, it's impersonal. They don't care. They're just saying whatever they feel like saying right then. Frequently, just as quick as we would talk here. No thinking about it ahead of time, but without any kind of feedback in the process. But then with Twitter and with areas that people expect it to be short, even if it's not a true character limit, on top of all of that, the nuance just gets stripped away and people just say it in really, really short soundbite versions that come out even worse. Drives me crazy. I hate Twitter. I use it, but I hate it.
Yeah, that's sort of like the someone once told me that Twitter was made is mostly about narcissists screaming at other narcissists.
I used to think Twitter was just a great advertising platform. Like, when it first came out, that was what I figured it was. Basically a way to advertise for free and convince people they wanted to hear your ads.
They still get a lot of money from these apps.
Yeah, but you don't just advertise for free anymore. Now they're trying to get you to pay to advertise too. Promoted tweets.
What is social media's future? Will it continue evolve? Will it continually evolve or bankrupt itself? We all know that Facebook is on life support right now, along with YouTube and Google and Twitter.
I don't know that I would agree that. Well, I mean, Facebook has. I wouldn't even argue, but I'm not sure that I'd agree with that with Google and YouTube for the simple fact they have no competition. Not really.
Like, YouTube is like a net loss for Google. Like,
it has been all along, though there's some argument about if it's actually a net loss or if it's a reported loss because that's better for tax purposes. But yeah, it's been the case all along. Like, they started out and there was a time when they wasn't even sure that they were going to be able to continue due to the cost of bandwidth and storage. And these are problems that anywhere else that tries to spring up also have. But then they don't have the funds and the information to sell to advertisers and all these other things that Google already has.
you roboed out.
Oh, what am I on the worst network or something here? Yes, that's why. Stupid Wi-Fi. Need to get a better place. But no, what I was saying was that YouTube's always been a net loss, but Google has the funds to deal with that to a degree, whereas anybody that tries to compete doesn't have those same resources. The funds, the stored information on people to basically sell to advertisers, all of that. So the others just seem to kind of get shut down. That's what happened with VidMe. They couldn't even get ads.
Yes.
No.
So what?
So yeah, I just don't know about them being on life support, because as long as they want to do it, it seems like they're the only ones that can and will at all, even if they're doing things that piss people off.
Just most corporations, well, not most corporations, but most big businesses such as Google or YouTube will be eventually seen as too big to fail. That's kind of sucky.
Well, fortunately, at least, these aren't things that are actually essential to people's lives, despite what some people seem to think. If we no longer had a place to share videos for free or to do this for free, I mean, yeah, it'd suck for anybody who's doing that for a living or even just as a routine hobby, but society can keep going. That doesn't crash the economy. That doesn't, doesn't destroy the world in any sense. It just reduces some of the conversations on it.
Doesn't destroy the world. Actually, I think the internet is pretty much now integrated. It's pretty much integrated.
The internet, yes. But there's a difference between the internet and YouTube. Like, let's say that Google, all of Google's products fell. Well, they're kind of the biggest search to the point I don't think they have any risk of, like, a competition outdoing them, competitor. But there are other search engines that work fairly well, even that have some of their features, even though people don't really like them. I mean, I get paid, in a sense, to deal with Bing. Very small amounts of gift cards, but they pay people to use their search engine. They exist. Other email servers exist. Other cloud storage exists. Other app stores exist. Other operating systems for cell phones exist. All these other products they have really do have somebody else. So what would basically disappear is this particular communication medium that may not have a replacement immediately or at all because of the same things that caused it to be a net loss. That's what I meant by it, them falling wouldn't destroy any part of the world. It would just reduce this kind of communication.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna end this. I think I'm gonna end the stream here. Thanks for coming on my YouTube channel.
All right, no problem.